My name is Julie Ponesse, and this message is about mandatory vaccinations. I am a professor of ethics at Huron College at the University of Western Ontario. It's one of the largest universities in Canada. Today, I'm going to teach you a short lesson on the universally accepted ethics of coercing people into medical procedures. I'll be the example.
Some of you may have already heard a bit from Dr. Julie Ponesse, a university professor at one of the largest universities in Canada, except she's not working right now. She believes her body is her choice and that she should be able to teach her students on ethics, no matter what her decision is when it comes to medical choices. Take a look.
This is not just or not even primarily an issue about whether or not a person is vaccinated. It's a question about whether or not your employer and the state is entitled to your medical information. We have a Personal Health Information Protection Act. We have a Freedom of Information and Protection Act. And those pieces of legislation exist so that our personal medical information can remain private unless we voluntarily choose to reveal it. That's a different thing, right? But a mandate does not operate on the idea that the information is being invited or requested voluntarily. To mandate something is to demand it on pain of consequence.
Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
Drea Humphrey here with Rebel News. Now, I've got a question for you. Do you remember the name of your favorite teacher? I bet you do. Why? Well, because they were all the difference between school being dreadful to, hey, you know what, class isn't so bad when that teacher's around. They make a big impact on your life. Now, they're the same type of teacher you want for your child, not just at an elementary or high school, but also at college and university too, because they are literally shaping the minds of the future. Now imagine a teacher like that isn't able to teach simply because they're not ready to or don't want to take an injection and have that put inside of their own person. Now imagine that is the reason why that teacher couldn't teach. 3 years ago, that would have been an insane concept to think about, but now it's being pushed everywhere we look, in every province and across the world, primarily by bureaucrats and public health lords. Teachers like Julie Ponesse from Huron University in Ontario, who, by the way, I had a look at her ratings online, has great ratings from former students, is one of those teachers facing that disgusting reality. Because Julie wasn't comfortable wearing a mask anymore or having something put inside her person that she didn't want there. She was put on leave with pay, and then recently, after I actually did this interview with her, received a notice from her dean saying that if you don't comply, you will be terminated. Who will be left to shape the minds if politicians get to decide what medical interventions need to be shoved inside of our teachers' bodies, whether they like it or not? This is not a reality we want to stand with. That's why at Rebel News, we are doing everything we can to fight the rollout of these vaccine passports. Please stand with us if you want to save Canada and keep it free. Please go to fightvaccinepassports.com. Donate whatever you can to our legal challenges to fight these passports. Every penny you donate there does not go to Rebel News. It goes straight to the lawyers, the legal fees, and you also get a charitable receipt back. Thank you for joining that fight with us. But for now, let's hear from one of those favorite teachers who is facing a grave dilemma. All right, Julie, thanks so much for being here on Rebel News. Now, I saw a video, it got sent to me from a few people, and they said, you've got to talk to her. And I completely agree, because the message that you have is something that we are not really hearing at all with all the madness that's happened. So you have a PhD in philosophy as well as ethics. And did you want to add on to that?
Yeah, so it's in philosophy. That's kind of the general discipline. And then specifically ethics and ancient philosophy are sort of areas within philosophy. And I have a background in medical ethics. So in ethics, we have theory, different, sort of the ideal principles that we might articulate and to live in accordance with. And then we also have applied kinds of ethics. So medical ethics and business ethics and engineering ethics, for example. So I have a background in medical ethics.
And you, like so many other people, are being faced with an ultimatum of sorts. You are being told in your position now that you have to be jabbed. Is that right?
Well, what we're told specifically, so the vaccination mandate that Western has implemented for returning to classes in September requires uploading proof of vaccination by a certain date. So if you haven't been vaccinated, of course, you can't upload proof of vaccination. And there are some other aspects of that mandate. From a teacher's point of view, we also have to mask while teaching in the classroom. And I believe also part of the mandate is for students to wear masks while in confined spaces, but don't quote me on that.
Right. And so when it comes to ethics, I mean, up until recently, it was completely unethical, am I right, to pressure people into getting a vaccination or giving their medical information to people, or to punish them if they don't. So what is the alternative if you're not comfortable giving that information to your employers?
Right. Well, I think the first thing that's important to be clear about is that there's a difference between forced and mandated vaccination. So forced vaccination is just how it sounds, that you would be, held down and something would be injected into you by physical force. Mm-hmm. Mandated vaccination is basically you must do this, or there might be a certain set of consequences. So in the employment context, or of students attending university or college, you would need to upload proof of vaccination. And if you don't do that, then there would be certain consequences for your employment or your student status. So from an employment point of view, we wouldn't be allowed to teach possibly, or to set foot on campus. So those are the conditions that have come along with my refusal to upload vaccination status. I have been removed from my teaching position and asked not to step foot on campus, and also not to attempt to teach my students, which that is another red flag in a long line of red flags, according to myself, because you would think that if the university or Health Canada or our governments, generally speaking, were interested in making accommodation for what we might call conscientious objectors, so people who object to a mandate and choose not to comply for reasons of conscience or philosophical belief or whatever, that reasonable accommodation would be given. And you would think, especially given that we have proven to be able to teach online successfully for the last year and a half, arguably successfully, right? Not ideal, certainly, but it's possible, that would be something that would be offered. And in the context of Western anyway, students who, or faculty, cannot choose to teach online and avoid the vaccination mandate, which doesn't make any kind of immunological sense, right? Because if you're physically removed from campus, you shouldn't be a viral threat to anyone. But they're linking the vaccination, proof of vaccination status to your employment, generally speaking, and not to your physical presence on campus or something like that, right?
It's so mind-boggling. It reminds me of a student who's claiming that he was banned from attending an online class for not being vaccinated as well. Now, how are your colleagues responding to this mandate, and also responding to your opposition to it?
Well, it depends what you mean by colleagues, I guess. I have a number of the other academics, so other institutions of higher learning in Ontario and throughout Canada, who are very supportive, who are facing the same kind of choice between, complying with the mandate or facing various kinds of employment consequences, who are incredibly supportive. If by colleagues you mean people within my department at Huron College or the administration at Huron College, the communication with them has quite seriously broken down. It's become very litigious. Lawyers have become involved. And that, to me, there's a sadness to that and an irony to that is so much bigger than my particular employment context, because in a university where you're supposed to create an arena or a context where ideas can be freely exchanged, and ideas are not supposed to be shut down. There aren't supposed to be biases against them before you even hear them, before you even entertain them. And I sent a letter to my president, dean, and chair very shortly after the mandate was first announced. So this was about a month ago now, I guess, outlining my general concerns with the mandate. And I didn't get a response from any of them. And then just a few days, just before the long weekend, got a very short email saying, so I take it from this, you're not complying with the mandate. And that to me is a complete circumvention of all that intellectual discourse is supposed to be about, right? Mm-hmm. So why not respond to some of these comments and criticisms, offer me your opinion, offer me your view, and no, it's not sufficient to say we're just following the directives of the ministry, we're just following the directives of Health Canada, because that's just passing the buck, intellectually speaking, right? I want to know the reasons why this institution, why this administrator feels comfortable following this particular rule, and not to offer any reason on those grounds is to be about as unacademic as a person could be.
Wow. Now, I had a look at some of your ratings as a teacher to see what some of your previous students have said about you, and you have really good ratings. It looks like you've been doing a good job there so far. And it seems like, some of what you're saying seems like instead of people thinking critically, critical thinking has been replaced with compliance thinking. So what would you be teaching your students about what we're seeing across Canada and the world right now when it comes to matters of ethics?
The irony in all of this for someone in my position especially is that I'm hired. I'm currently being challenged and dismissed in some capacity for doing exactly the thing I'm hired to do in the classroom. Right. And what that is supposed to be, it's not telling our students exactly what to think. It's not telling them that what to think about abortion or capital punishment or lying or murder or any of those things. It's trying to create an atmosphere in which an open exchange of ideas on those topics is possible. And then we talk about how to think critically through them and, how to identify some inconsistencies in thinking, how not to be coerced or to, what a free and informed decision-making process looks like in order for us to be rational, in order for our decisions to reflect who we are as human beings and not just to take on the reasons that someone else has given us, whether they're people in a position of authority or not, and not just to partake in a kind of groupthink, not just to comply either because we blindly trust an authority that we don't know very much about, or because, well, everybody else is doing it, so I guess that's a good reason to do it, right? We show how historically that has led to a lot of problems, right? Mm-hmm. So all the things that we teach in the classroom in an ethics context are so badly needed right now. We talk a lot about harm and rights and how to balance harms against rights, and we see that discussion right now that, rights are all well and good when everything is going smoothly and they're kind of, luxuries. But when we have an emergency order, then rights are no longer inalienable, right? And what it means for a right to be inalienable is that nothing can trump it. And we seem to have forgotten that right now.
Absolutely. We've done lots of reports. I've done some as well on people getting fired, or their employer would say it's their choice for not getting the vaccine, or some actually complying with it as well when it comes to being faced with that decision. And I have those conversations through emails and phone calls as well, that people are going either way. Now, you're taking the stand when it comes to just having to declare that information. In closing, let us know why it was important for you to take the stand at this point in time.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because this is not just, or not even primarily, an issue about whether or not a person is vaccinated. It's a question about whether or not your employer and the state is entitled to your medical information. We have a Personal Health Information Protection Act. We have a Freedom of Information and Protection Act. And those pieces of legislation exist so that our personal medical information can remain private unless we voluntarily choose to reveal it. That's a different thing, right? But a mandate does not operate on the idea that the information is being invited or requested voluntarily. To mandate something is to demand it on pain of consequence.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's been a pleasure talking with you, and I'm so thankful that you did a video about this. I mean, you could have just taken the stand and not shared it with Canada, but we are so starved for information like this. So thank you for being on Rebel News. I wish you the best, and keep in touch.
Thank you so much.
So are we just going to lose medical professionals and teachers just like that because they won't take this jab? And what about the ones who did take the jab but aren't going to take the booster? Comment below. Let me know what you think. I just want to say a special thanks to everyone who has joined us by donating at fightvaccinepassports.com. We couldn't do any of this without you guys. I'm excited. I know it's a David and Goliath type fight, but we've got to do something, or else